to get us started. It looks like we're going to do a little roll call. Who's doing that for me? Let's go around. Yeah, let's go around the room. Start with Jordan, and then we'll get everyone online. Go ahead.
Jordan Chandler, WFRC.
Dirk Burton, Mayor of West Jordan City.
Brett McKiff, Utah Department of Health and Human Services.
Braden Mitchell, Mayor, Riverdale City.
Hugh Van Wagenen, WFRC.
Troy Walker, Mayor of Draper City.
Andrew Gruber, WFRC.
Noah Materko, American Heart Association.
Kayla Malden, MSD.
Tim Sullivan, Township and Range Community Planning.
I'm Thomas McMurtry with Avenue Consultants.
And Jordan, you're going to call the online folks, right? Thank you.
It looks like we have Jory Johnner, Lila Rosenfield, Ted Knowlton, Tim Harpst, Jeff Euler, Commissioner Fackrell, Jerison Atkin, Noah Materko, Marisa Manzioni, Brittany Ward, Kinley, Rosie Hernandez, Mark Bradley, Matt Castle, Lauren Victor, Michaela Jordan, Morgan Haddon, Byron Head, and Becca Rolfe.
Thank you. It is Flag Day today, and Mayor Burton has requested that we do the Pledge of Allegiance, which I think is probably in order. So Mayor Burton, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Those of you at home can pledge as well.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. The next item on our agenda is an item for action, minutes of the Active Transportation Committee meeting that was held April the 12th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve or discussion?
Move to approve.
Mayor Burton has made a motion to approve the minutes. Or second?
Second.
All right, second. Are we any further discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing no opposed, we'll rule that motion passes unanimously.
Hey, Mayor, excuse me, just one comment. The folks that are participating online, we want you to know that you can participate fully. So we're watching you. Feel free to speak up at any point that you want and or raise a hand, and we'll make sure to call on you, okay?
All right, thank you. All right, the next item number 2 is the chair's report. So I'll start off with that. First item to talk about is the Bike Month recap. As you know, and probably participated in, the Golden Spoke ride has become a big part of Bike Month, and the ride had approximately 300 people attend in commemoration of the Golden Spoke, or the trails in the northern part of the state. The Golden Spoke Network, as you know, stretches from Ogden to Provo. It's amazing. And there were several rides held along the line. I know some other cities held their own rides. I did one in Draper that I had about 30 people attend, and we rode the Porter Rockwell Trails. It was actually pretty cool. Last year we had like 5, so it's gotten bigger, and it was exciting. A lot of people. We had 2 different lengths of rides. One that was like 20, and one that was 7, and most of the people did the long ride. So we rode into Lehigh, and it was awesome. Of course, the Denver Rio Grande Western Trail was celebrating its 20th year of existence. And if you haven't been on that trail, I encourage you to get on it. It's really quite amazing. So that was really part of the Golden Spoke. Then we had the Move Utah Summit. Hundreds of professionals from across the state gathered to learn about active transportation, healthy living, how to make our communities healthier through active transportation. I had an opportunity to speak on a panel with some other mayors about how we've gotten active transportation part of our community. Both in Draper, we have a lot of dirt mountain trails, which we're kind of famous for, but we also have a significant amount of paved trails, which we talked a little bit about. And the panel was interesting. It was mostly other municipalities wanting to know how you fund it. That's always the #1 question. and how you get your council to support it and your citizens to support it. So we had pretty good discussion, different ideas about it. And it was exciting because a lot of communities are really catching on to this. And I thought it was a great meeting. And then the bike summit, hosted by Bike Utah, had a diverse panel that discussed current and future state of e-biking. I was sad I couldn't make that. I had to do my actual day job. So, but talking about various forms of it, the challenges, the speed regulation, embracing what e-bikes mean, and what they can do for average people that may not be big into cycling. The e-bike is a game changer. Mayor Burton, it was held in your city. So would you want to give us a quick little rundown on how it went? What regulations you came up with or any of that?
Well, e-bikes, one of the things that they need to be recharged sometimes. I don't have an e-bike. The bike I rode, I pedaled, and sometimes I need to be recharged sometimes as well. Usually I do that with a burger and fries, and it seems to work. It was a good conference. Yeah, thank you for those who came to West Jordan for that. That was a great place to host it. And there was a good turnout there, some good discussions about e-bikes and the opportunities that opens up for additional people who may not be bikers in the past, who can now participate in that type of transportation. And one of the great things about biking is the freedom that it provides for you and the flexibility that you could do. So that's really a wide range. I was biking with my original employer, who is in his upper 70s now. And I was riding my pedal bike and he was riding his e-bike. And a couple of people made comments like, can't believe you're cheating using an e-bike. And he just turned and looked at him and said, you know what? When you're my age, just hope that you can still ride. and he was out riding. And had it not been an e-bike, he wouldn't have been out. And that is the difference that makes. So e-bikes are here, they're here to stay, and it opens the realm up for a whole lot more of our neighbors and friends.
Yeah, I've been amazed. I've been mountain biking in different places, and I've run across lots of people in their 70s mountain biking, which, you wouldn't, but having fun, really some really good riders. But e-bikes have equalized it for them. They're out riding in their 70s. You're right. I agree with your friend. I mean, it's not cheating, it's still riding, and it's getting you in, your heart rate's up. It's a great way to go. And did you guys talk about the different speeds, the classes, the 28 mile an hour versus the 20, or were there?
That was discussed, and I can't report on that. I can't remember what the outcome was, but there was discussion about that in detail. And I just Hugh can probably report on that better, but that's a critical part. And one of the things that I've asked our attorneys to look at is when people are a shared path where people walk and ride, is limiting what those speeds are going to be. But when they're not shared and they're just for bikes, then the limitation would go away. So that's something in our city we're looking to do.
Yeah, thanks, mayors. And the speed regulation is one of those difficult things, especially on those shared use paths. As you mentioned, you have people walking, people with strollers, right? And then, children, and then some folks on e-bikes who are not necessarily going faster than somebody on a really fast road bike might be going.
Right.
But dealing with that speed is a challenge. And so a lot of folks are setting speed limits, or at least putting up signs that say what the speed limit is on any given facility. Of course, enforcement's really tricky. And so some of that is education. Some of it's being courteous, right, to our fellow participants wherever we are. And I've been on a mountain bike trail where, somebody comes up on me pretty fast behind me, just waiting to get around. And so I think it was
it Mayor Walker?
Mayor Walker.
Not on the uphill.
So just, I think generally as anybody we're out using, I think there's a lot of education that needs to occur, and sort of self-enforcement, amongst ourselves and our friends and those we interact with in those situations. But it's evolving, and we'll get better at it as we go on.
Anybody have any comments online or in the room about if you attended any of these summits, what you thought of them or what you took away from them?
I'd like to share another personal experience. I ride on occasion through my city. And the other day I was riding along. I thought I was doing pretty good. I was doing, 12, 13 miles an hour. And then this girl just goes and passes me. And I looked at it and thought, way to go. I couldn't keep up with her. I don't know if it's an e-bike or not, because sometimes you can hear them hum. She was whistling, so I don't know. But that is good. That gets more people out, and the more people we have on the trails, the better they are. And the more people that ride on those roads pick up the go-aheads before I get there, and then I don't have to repair my tires.
Anybody else?
I got a comment.
Go ahead.
I had the opportunity to be down in at Bryce Canyon National Park last week for the centennial of Bryce, and then had some fun in the area, as one does when one goes to Bryce. And I was amazed, more than I ever seen before, people on e-bikes around the area. Obviously, I'm not talking about on the trails in Bryce, but in the surrounding area, lots of people who I think had rented them, but they were using that as the way to go from trailhead to trailhead. And just, you know, by the sort of whoops and hollers coming from the groups, they were having so much fun. And it just goes to what you were talking about, is that e-bikes provide a way for people of all ages who might not normally ride under their own power to get out, to leave the car at home and get out and have some fun and move around for physical health and for fun. So it's terrific to see.
Anybody online have any comments? All right.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Fackrell. I just want to mention that I went to the Trail Summit or the Trails Forum, and just want you to know that it was very, very good. It was the biggest thing I took away from that is that trails are for everyone, whatever kind you need. In other words, there's going to be different people for different types of trails, mountain bike trails, bicyclists, e-bikes, horse trails, OHV trails. And I think we all need to be concerned about all of them. And it's just a matter of getting out and doing it and being in the open, having the help that we need because of that.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Next item to talk about is the WFRC was awarded the silver level bicycle friendly business following Draper City's lead in applying to the bicycle friendly designation from the League of American Bicyclists. Wasatch Front received that silver status as a bicycle friendly business. It's a designation that's good for 4 years. We want to congratulate WFRC for it and encourage other businesses and other communities. Our city we're a bronze level recipient, and you know, we worked hard to get to the designation, and we're working on trying to get to the silver. So, but yeah, congratulations, Andrew, Wasatch Front, all of you. Excellent.
Mayor Walker. Yeah. One thing that it's interesting with the League of American Bicyclists designations, the cities, and this is something for all the cities to think about. There are two classifications. You can apply for your city as a whole, right? So what you're doing for all your residents, but also as like an employer. So the questions are a little different, and I'd encourage, you know, the cities to look at both of those, because it does encourage your employees to, and you as an employer, to provide the facilities and accommodations and flexibility for bicyclists to come into work and stuff like that. So they're both really good, and they're really good designations. I have not seen, and maybe Hugh would know, they do state rankings, and I haven't seen that recently, but I think we were ranked pretty high the last time I saw it.
Thank you. That's a good point. You can, and then, you know, individual businesses in your communities can apply as well. And that, the more businesses in your community that have it, it enhances your city's ability to get it as well. So that's another thing. The two things in life I love the most are bikes and airplanes. And since bicycle mechanics invented the airplane, it just fits hand in hand. So anyway, next item on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone here in the room that would like to make public comment? Go on up to the podium if you would.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Spencer Reel. I am a resident of Taylorsville.
Spencer, you pull that mic up just a little bit, or bend over. I know you probably can't do
that. How's that? Is that a little better?
Better. Go ahead.
I'm a resident of Taylorsville. I am a teacher in West Jordan. Last summer, I bought an e-bike and I have put about 4,600 miles on it. I lived without a car for a year. I've now bought a car. I'm very sad about it. But the comment I want to make is, if we're serious about getting people onto bikes out of cars, we need to think about the journeys people make every day. I ride the Jordan River Trail fairly frequently, and it's awesome. And that kind of grade separated away from cars trail is popular because of those traits that it has. The issue is that any place we want to go, our cities have put those stores and those businesses on giant streets. And for where I live in Taylorsville, I would have to ride on Redwood Road, or I would have to ride on 4100 South. And both of those streets are awful in every way. Now, I know that you guys are not UDOT, and UDOT is going to take some convincing to change how they build their roads. But it strikes me that as they're wanting to spend $1.6 billion expanding or turning Bangalore Highway into a grade separated highway, they want to do $1.6 billion for 4.5 miles. My question is, what are the cities getting in return for that? What is Taylorsville, what is West Valley getting in return for taking hundreds of people's homes? It seems to me like Redwood Road, which is an adjacent north-south arterial, it seems like that could be turned into something where people could make their daily trips. I know that WFRC has some sway into what projects get prioritized and what projects get funded, but that's the kind of thing I want cities and WFRC to be pushing UDOT on. They get all this money for these giant roadways, and then we keep the same surface highways as they are, 700 East, State Street, Redwood Road. And I think that's the biggest impediment to normal people, because let's be honest, if we're here and we care about this, we're not the normal people who are going to take some convincing. We don't take convincing. We don't need to be convinced. Other people need a safe, easy path to go where they go for their daily business. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room? Hold on for you. You're not the public. Any other public? Anyone online that's joined us in the public that would like to make public comment? All right, Mayor Burton, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments there. By the way, in West Jordan, we are getting ready to expand 90th South and take it from 5600 West approximately to Highway 111. And that'll be a new state road. And not only will it have bike lanes, but it'll also have separated bike lanes on there as well. And what is really cool about that is when I went to the meeting to discuss it, and I said, pulled out, you know, are we gonna have the bike lanes? It was already on the drawing. So UDOT is making some progress. They have a ways to go, but they've made some good progress. So I'm pleased to see that it's going forward. Another thing is, for Bike Month, our HR department decided to encourage for Healthy West Jordan, the employees of West Jordan, to ride their bikes to work. So they ran a campaign called Bike Like Burton. And if they were to do that and ride their bikes to work, they were put in the drawing, and the winner of that got a $250 gift card from a local bike shop. And it was our first time in doing that in the city, and it was quite successful. I look forward to do that again next year. So Bike Like Burton.
I appreciate your public comment as well, because you're right about, and the other thing that's interesting, how many stores do you see that have a bike rack? Now, we were in Davis down there on that tour, all the stores had a bike rack. So they made it possible for people to go shop at when we went Trader Joe's, right? And that was like commerce. People were rolling up on their bikes, but we need to do, that's a good point. Well taken. And do you have something to say?
I would just want to note to everybody that Mayor Joy Petro from Layton City is online with us now, and also Alex from UTA Planning has joined us.
Thank you.
And for those who made the trip here, there's muffins. If you'd like a muffin, help yourself. None for you people who are online.
All right, if there's no further, go ahead.
Me?
Go ahead, Jory.
Okay. I was just going to put a little plug. Michaela Jordan's on the call right now. And you had mentioned bike parking at businesses. She's currently collecting ideas on helping communities with ordinances. And so this would be a good one maybe that she could help the ATC on is, you know, a bike parking ordinance or something that we could help communities work with their businesses to develop some kind of standard across the region or something like that. So thought I'd put a little plug in for Michaela. And if there are any other ordinances or anything like that that you're interested in, that's something we're interested in at WFRC, helping communities with across the region.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jory. Absolutely. I echo what he said.
All right, we'll move on from the public comment portion of our meeting and go to item number 4. This is a presentation on vulnerable road user safety and assessment. Thomas McMurdy, am I saying that right, Thomas? With Avenue Consultants, he's going to speak to us about UDOT's vulnerable road user safety assessment, which aims to identify areas of high safety risk to people biking, walking, and rolling. So go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I think you guys are, I'm sharing my screen. Looks like you can see it up there. And I'll try to remember to speak into the mic here. So Alex has seen this. He's on our, Alex has seen this because he was at our Move Utah Summit. Hugh is on our TAC committee. UDOT is leading a vulnerable road user safety assessment. And so I'm just here to kind of talk about it and give you a little bit of an update on kind of where we are. I'm not going to introduce myself. What we're really focused on is bicycle and pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries. Last year in Utah alone, 68 people lost their lives as pedestrian or cyclists. In fact, it was 15 cyclists and 53 pedestrians were hit and killed on Utah roads. And so this is concerning. And the legislature, our federal government passed the bipartisan infrastructure bill about, it was almost 2 years ago now. It's the same bill, Andrew, that's funded in the SS4A that you guys are leading. And this bill also required all 50 DOTs across the country to put together a vulnerable road user safety assessment. And so UDOT is leading theirs. They're all due this November. So every state has to have their assessment completed this November, by November 15th, and submitted as part of their SHIP program. As part of this, the feds have provided some guidance. And the guidance has been pretty clear about what we want to assess and how we want to address things. But the biggest thing is they just defined vulnerable road users as a non-motorist. So it's anybody who's a pedestrian, a cyclist, anybody who's on a personal conveyance device like a scooter or a motorized wheelchair. They were very clear that it is not motorcycles. So that's just as a definition, that's what a vulnerable road user is. And so we are working real hard on the VRU assessment. So yeah, I'm not gonna get too much into this. This is a little bit about what we're gonna deliver. I will say at the end of this, in November of this year, we're gonna have a documentation of the assessment, but it's gonna be delivered in a web-based, in a website. So similar to zerofatalities.com. If you go there today, you can get the full safety plan from UDOT, and it's interactive and there's charts and things. We're gonna deliver something similar to that by the end of the year. This is a schedule. I don't have to get too far into that. I want to just kind of show you guys, the sheer numbers that we're talking about. These are all of the pedestrian related crashes from the last 6 years. Oh, the guidance that the feds provided was very clear that we had to use the last 6 years of data from 2017 to 2022. So that's the data set that we're looking at. So it's 5 years plus the most recent year. And we've cleaned that data up. So the 2022 data is now complete. By the way, there was a ped fatal that got hit 15 minutes before midnight on New Year's Eve and then died in the hospital a couple of days later. So the data just took a while to kind of clean up and get final numbers from last year. I just wanted to point out here on pedestrian crashes, if you look, the last 3 years have gone up tremendously in the total number of ped crashes. These are the bike crashes. Those total numbers haven't climbed as much, but still quite concerning. And then these are the crashes of people in, a wheelchair, skateboard, personal conveyance device, scooter. You'll notice that those have kind of jumped up too, both in 2019 and then again in 2022. We believe that jump is actually likely more due to having police departments record data more correctly than rather just a sheer increase in these crashes. So we're getting more and more police departments are recording these crashes, you know, and marking them as that these people were on a skateboard, scooter, that type of thing, and not just a bicycle or pedestrian. I mentioned those were all crashes. I mentioned that we're specifically focused on fatalities and serious injury crashes. Here they are. So in the 6 years that we're looking at, there were 299 fatalities. There's about 1,200 total serious injury crashes. So if you add up all of these serious injury crashes, so that's the real data set that we're really dealing with. Those are the ones we actually care about, that we're, you know, really trying to like save lives and prevent serious injuries. And so you can see just in the sheer numbers of fatalities, they've gone, again, they've been increasing in the last several years, which is something that UDOT is concerned about. By the way, one thing I will make a plug for UDOT is that the feds require that if 15% of all your fatalities in the entire state are bicycle and ped related, then you, by rule, they're asking you that you have to spend 15% of your infrastructure money, the SHIP funds have to be spent on bicycle ped safety, right? So, and UDOT gets something like, I don't know, 30 or 40 million a year for the SHIP funds. So that money, if over 15% are bike ped fatals, so then the state would require that you spend 15% on it. UDOT has committed to doing that regardless. They actually do not have 15% of bike ped fatals of all crashes, but they have committed that they're going to spend 15% of all their money on bike ped issues, regardless of what the data indicates. So, you know, they are committed to that.
Thomas, excuse me.
Yeah.
Can you just clarify when you say 15% of their money, which money are you referring to?
I'm referring to the SHIP funds, the Highway Safety Improvement Program funds, which is not the TIF. It's not any of the other funds that they have. It's not the STIP funding. Right. It's SHIP funding.
Which is a particular federal program.
That's right.
And money comes. Do you recall roughly what that program size is annually?
For you, it's somewhere between 30 and 40 million, I believe. I don't remember exactly how much it is.
But just as a sense of order of magnitude, we're talking at least 15% of that one program would be spent on bike and ped. Just that. Thank you very much.
So yeah, UDOT spends hundreds of millions a year, right, from all the different funding sources, but it's just the SHIP funds. And again, UDOT has committed to doing that kind of above and beyond. What we are doing now for the vulnerable road user safety assessment is we have identified high-risk areas. And high-risk areas is an interesting idea because we're not looking at just where bike ped crashes have occurred. I showed you some maps earlier with a bunch of dots on them, but rather which areas are at a high risk for a bicycle or pedestrian fatality to occur, right? So in some cases, we can look at past data and say, oh, they're occurring here. But regardless of that, we want to say, okay, well, what type of situations would a bike pedestrian fatality occur? And so we've been looking at a bunch of different data sets. We identified 126 different data sets. These were like the top 50 data indicators of a high-risk area. I don't really want to go through them all, but I just wanted you to see that we're looking at all kinds of things. And I'll show you a couple of them, right? But we're looking at things like the volume of cars, the presence of sidewalks. We're looking at things like the presence of shoulders. We're looking at speeds. We're looking at, you know, demographics of the area, right? Levels of poverty, the racial demographics of the area, a bunch of different components that might lead to it being a high-risk area. I've actually completed this analysis. So one thing that we were looking at was the idea of vulnerable road users, and the feds specifically have identified a social vulnerability index. And this looks at all of the data that you see kind of on the right. It's the overall vulnerability of an area based on all of these detailed criteria. So it's based on ethnicity and race. It's based on, you know, the poverty level, households with no cars, the high school education. There's a lot of different things you can see that it's kind of based on. And it has indicated or given us an, you know, an index of social vulnerability. And this is absolutely one of the factors that we looked at to see if an area is high risk. We also looked at the Smart Location Database, which is a composite of 3 different indices, and specifically it uses the National Walkability Index. So it measures how walkable an area is based on the infrastructure improvements that are there, presence of sidewalks, all kinds of things, right? Like walk sheds. And so all of that's kind of built in. You can kind of see a little bit on the right what it looks like in Salt Lake County. And we use this data set as well to kind of understand, how it compares and if it is an indicator of identifying high-risk areas for vulnerable road crashes. So let me just show you some of the data sets because I think you'll find these kind of quite interesting. And then I can kind of wrap up or take questions. So this is the presence of shoulders, and this is just for state routes because we have detailed shoulder data for state routes. And what this is showing is, pedestrians, bicycles, and other pedestrian crashes, and the fatalities on the left, and it's just the presence of shoulders. And if you look at this, right, the percentages are so much higher when there's no shoulder. If there's zero shoulder or up to like a foot or whatever of shoulder space, then the percentage of this is the overall percentage of total fatalities that occur in these different designations are so much higher. And as soon as you have some shoulder, just a little bit, 2 foot, 4 foot, 6 feet, whatever, these percentages come down. If you look at just the PEDs alone, it goes 40%, 12, 9, 10, 10, 10. So if we have shoulders on a roadway at all, it'll help save lives, right? It just is a clear indicator that if we just give people any space at all. Hugh sent me a great video of some kids playing in a roadway where there was no shoulders in Morgan, I think it was, and there was no shoulder. And so they were actually in the travel lane because there's no shoulder present. And the same is true for serious injuries. You see the same thing, right? Any presence of shoulder is important. I'm going to skip that one. This one I also think is quite interesting. It's the speed at which a collision occurs. So the chart on the left is a speed limit, the posted speed limit when we have serious injury and fatal crashes. And you can see that it spikes at like 30 and then 35 miles an hour. There's been a lot of research that indicates that if you're a pedestrian and you're hit by a car, it's somewhere about 28 miles an hour that it becomes fatal. You can take a hit at 22 miles an hour and survive, but if you get hit at 29 miles an hour, you're gonna die. It's overly simplification, but that's kind of it, that, once we get to those speeds, they end up being really bad for, being hit by a car. And that's what the left graph is showing. What the one on the right is indicating is this is the estimated speed at the time of the collision, not the posted speed limit on the roadway, but how fast the vehicle was actually going when they collided. And if you look, and this is the total serious injury and fatal fatalities that occur. And basically this is about the same as it is over here, right? For the PEDs that are dying, they're getting hit 35, 45 miles an hour. But this shows that if the vehicle hits their brakes, if they slow down, if the collision happens at 5, 10, 15 miles an hour, the likelihood that is a serious injury and not a fatality goes way up, right? So you can survive that. You might leave in an ambulance, but like those type of collisions, can be survivable. And so just serious injuries goes up, and fatalities go down if people hit the brakes, right? If people can just slow down at that impact. I don't necessarily need to go through all of this type of stuff. This is just, again, more occurrences of where these injuries and fatalities kind of occur. People asked about vehicles. This was something that came up early. Are we killing more people because our vehicles are bigger? Are more trucks and SUVs involved in collisions versus passenger cars or whatever? And the answer is no. It ends up being very close to the percentage of the vehicle ownership in the state. This one was interesting though, so I'll just talk about this briefly. So we looked at, I mentioned poverty status. This is an indicator. This is the entire state broken into quintiles. And so the whole state kind of falls into these different quintiles of percentage of poverty. And as poverty percentage goes up, so do bike ped injuries and fatalities. So fatal and serious injury crashes go up for pedestrians, and the same is true for bicyclists. So what this means is in affluent areas, right? If you think about, I don't know, Park City or the East Side or whatever, that their bike ped fatalities and crashes are small. And in poorer areas, they're gonna have more bike ped fatals. And so just again, areas that as poverty increases, so do bike ped fatals. And this is just a map kind of indicating that same thing across the state. UDOT asked us to look at race. This is almost the first time we can do it. This is 2020 census data based on racial demographics, and it's similar to what you see for poverty. It's the same quintiles. We broke the entire state into quintiles, right? So what that means, here's that map of the state. So 1/5, 20% of the state falls into each of these 5 breaks by population, not by geography. And then we looked at it racially. And so the same type of thing that Indian, Asian, Black alone, all these 2 or more races, as the percentages of that race go up, so do the injuries and the serious injuries and fatal crashes for bicycles and peds, except for white alone. So if you look at white alone, it almost has an inverse effect, right? So as white alone percentages go up, the bike ped fatals go down. And then again, we looked at it for ethnicity. Hispanic Latino is not a race, it's ethnicity, and it indicates the same thing. So for Hispanic and Latino populations, as those percentages go up, so do bike ped fatals. Again, this is like the first time we've ever been able to kind of take a look at this. So we've gone through all this. I'm going to skip teenage driver. We've gone through all of this analysis, and we have identified the high-risk areas across the state. Again, not based on exactly where bike ped fatals have occurred, but rather which areas are the most high risk. I don't want to get into the details of exact calculations. There's a lot of analysis on all of these factors, but we have a map. It is up, and we have shared it with Wasatch Front and a bunch of organizations. We have collected comments on that map. That's what this is kind of showing, these comments. Hugh, we've collected over 200 comments in the 2 weeks that this has been available. Comment period closes on Friday, and then we're going to review all of the comments and kind of look at what people are telling us about these high-risk areas that we've identified. I have seen a bunch of questions pop up in the chat, so I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
How do we want to, does anybody in the room have a question they want to ask?
Thomas, what city do you live in?
I live in West Jordan City, everybody.
Great.
Do you want to read questions or comments from the chat?
I think one specific comment was from Michaela, and Michaela, I'll just ask you to unmute and ask the question if you could.
Sure. Yeah, Thomas, I was curious, when you looked at the rates of injury and fatalities among different types of vehicles, I was curious if you kind of adjusted those for the percent of, like, the proportion that those vehicles make on the road. For example, if passenger cars are 80% of the vehicles on the road, then having lower fatality rates, then their proportion would indicate something different than just these raw numbers.
Yeah, Michaela, that's a good question. The short answer is yes, we did look at that. And the percentages were not too far off from the prevalence of those vehicles. I don't have that data in front of me, but what I do have, I think, is teenage drivers. So I know this isn't vehicles, but we did look at it in terms of like the percentage that are occurring versus the percent that that exists. And so for teenage drivers, for example, they were responsible for 7% of all VRU fatalities over those last 6 years. And you can kind of see that kind of over here, this last chart on the far right. But they also make up exactly 7% of all drivers in the state of Utah. So it's an exact proportion. They are 7% of drivers, and they're responsible for 7% of crashes. So there wasn't anything that was like, largely disproportionate there. And the vehicles was similar. I mean, they weren't exact like that, but they were similar enough that there really wasn't, a hard conclusion to draw about, any one vehicle causing more fatalities than others.
Thank you. I was curious about that.
Commissioner Fackrell, if you're still online, I wonder if you'd like to speak to the video that Thomas mentioned, because that was a video that you took, I believe, of some of your family members in Morgan on that roadway with a lack of shoulder.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. That lack of the shoulder, yeah, go ahead and show it, and then I can explain it if you want.
You sent it to me. I think it's this one right here. Let me see if I can play the video. I think I'm sharing my screen. This is the video we talk about.
Okay. What's happening is you don't see the fourth one up there in front of the tall one. That's my granddaughter's. And this truck was coming along. He did what he should have, but he had to cut right back in. And you notice he slowed down because he came right up to my other granddaughter that was on a bicycle. And, I just think it's a situation that is pretty pretty bad, and they weren't playing. They were just we're walking up to their great grandfather's house. So you notice that it is narrow. Unfortunately, on Highway 66 right now, from Morgan City all the way out to almost this area where I'm at, they have put in a new road, and they put that white line right on the edge of the pavement now. It's no shoulder. So I hope that they're going to go and put some kind of a shoulder on there, but it's a serious problem what we have in Morgan County. Very serious, because we can't walk anymore or ride.
Thanks, Commissioner. And Thomas, I know there's a lot of the things back at a number of comments, and we'll get the chat put into the email that we send out later, so people can look at that, a number of comments. But I think some folks were interested in how the map that you showed, my understanding, it wasn't for general public release, but is there an opportunity at some point that the greater public will be able to look at this and comment in some fashion?
Yeah, but probably not on the map. Probably when we get to the end, as we're identifying stuff. If you guys were curious, I don't mind sharing with you the map. I think I can put it in the chat. I'm not sure how to do that. Hold on, let me see if I open the chat up. Can I paste up? Hold on, paste right there. There's the comment map I just stuck in the chat. Yeah, the map of high-risk areas was a relatively complicated process where I didn't want to get into it because there's just a lot of analysis. We spent about 2 or 3 months kind of working on it, where we went through all of those data sets that I talked about, like everything that we looked at, everything that's on slide 30. And we went through an analysis and looked at a direct correlation for how their individual indicator for vulnerable road user crashes. So we had all the crash data. We looked at we pulled data for every single one of these geographically. We overlaid them, and we did it like a Poisson analysis. And we went through like several different analyses, looked at a regression analysis for each of them. And we came up with how closely correlated they were. And a lot of them were not, and a lot of them were. And so ones that were, we chose those data sets, and we used them. We used 21 data sets, and if they had a direct correlation, we used those to identify the high-risk areas. So, like for example, I showed you like race and poverty, and it looked like they would have a strong correlation. But as we dug into it, they actually don't have a direct effect on the VRU crashes. They are correlated, but there are other elements within them that the same areas that have higher percentages of minorities are the same areas that have higher percentage of poverty, are the same areas that are next to arterial roads, are the same, they're the exact same areas that have a different lane use breakdown. And so we looked at all the individual factors. The ones that were associated with the roadway and the lane use had a strong correlation than the ones that were associated with race, if that makes sense. So those are the ones that we used to identify the high-risk areas. Ultimately, the high-risk areas are the exact areas that you would think. It's State Street, it's Redwood Road, it's 41st South, it's 33rd South here in Salt Lake. When you're looking at it, it's U111 and Magna. It's hard to see. It's all of the, if I opened up the map directly, we can kind of zoom in, but it goes all over the state. I mean, this is the map. So it's everything that if I open the legend up, it's all of these areas that are the most high risk for vulnerable road users. And so there's a bunch of areas all around the state. In fact, Ogden has just tons. There's just a lot of segments that are high risk for vulnerable road users. And so anyway, we've identified about 120 miles of roadways across the state that are dangerous for vulnerable road users that we are identifying as high risk. We're collecting some comments. We're going to clean up and make a final map. And then we're going to look at solutions to address them. What programs and projects can actually address these specific high risk areas. And that's what we're going to get to in the final report that's due in November. Tim, I've taken up way too much time.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Probably. So obviously a lot going on here. Stay tuned. And one of the efforts going on besides the Safe Streets and Roads for All efforts that are happening across the state as well. And these will be complementary efforts. But appreciate you, Thomas, coming in and chatting with us about that. So.
All right, thank you very much, Thomas. Excellent presentation. Next, and then we have the American Heart Association, Noah Materko. Did I say it right? Excellent. We'll introduce the American Heart Association and the organization's efforts to improve the health through changes in the built environment. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, you just got to get a little bit closer to the mic if you can, or bring it closer.
Yep, perfect. Cool, thanks. All right, let's see if I can, there we go. Well, my name is Noah Materko. I'm the Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association. Thank you so much for having me today. I had the chance to meet a few of you, but many I have not, so I appreciate your time. So I'm here to introduce what the American Heart Association does and how it overlaps with this work. Now, I don't want to make any assumptions about what you know about the American Heart Association or what you're wondering why a group that focuses on heart health is talking about active transportation. But a little bit more about me is I've been in Salt Lake for about 9 years now, and like a lot of people, I didn't envision myself living here so long. I showed up to go to school, and then I fell in love with the communities, and part of that is the trails, both down in Corner Canyon and all over the place in Park City, but also being able to connect with the communities. And a big part of that for me is biking and having access to different communities through urban trails. So I biked here today, and I live just over on the west side of the highway in Poplar Grove, and just about a mile away, but the experience of biking over there versus getting in like the safe zone around here is quite different. So, but we know this is a rural issue as well. So just a little bit more about the American Heart Association. For about 100 years, we've been focusing on addressing heart health, stroke health, cardiovascular health overall, and helping individuals and communities thrive. In that time, the American Heart Association has been known for funding life-saving research and creating programs to help every person live their healthiest life. So we like to approach all of our issue areas under the larger umbrella of heart health. And of course, what we're talking about, active transportation, getting out of your car and being able to do so safely and travel around is a big part of individual and community health. And in the past couple decades, the organization has transitioned into working more on advocacy and policy. And this is sort of the spectrum in which we like to approach public policy. But again, it's all under the umbrella of public health and heart health. So we start with our research, which we do a lot of funding of. We go to prevention, quality healthcare, and nonprofit issues. We're a national organization. We have presence in all 50 states. And I work here in Utah, and we have advocacy here in Utah, but we also work with partnerships with governments, nonprofits, faith-based organizations to help achieve our work. So here in Utah, we fund research. We fund about $7 million in research grants on heart and stroke health, and that's mostly up at the University of Utah, but we like to extend partnerships to other great universities here in Utah. We work on community level programs. A lot of that is to assess and address nutrition security. So one great program we're working on right now with Cavalry Baptist Church is to help their congregation identify food insecurity and connect those folks with the resources they need. So that's partnering with government, nonprofit, faith-based organizations, and creating awareness and tools. We do CPR training in workplaces. We do stroke awareness training. And then the policy and advocacy side is where I fall in. As our state government relations director, I work on our issue areas at the state level, the local level, and pretty much everywhere I can. I've been with the organization for about 7 months now, and I've really been enjoying it, but look at all these issue areas. That's a lot to learn. So tobacco free, obviously tobacco and related diseases are the #1 preventable disease and killer in the United States and a major risk factor in the development of cardiovascular disease. Quality systems of care. This is just that continuum of care, making sure that healthcare providers have the best resources and training to save as many lives as possible. Healthy eating, this ranges from addressing food insecurity, like I just talked about, to promoting nutrition for people of all ages. And access to care, extending healthcare coverage to all Americans that we can, working to ensure timely access along that continuum of care. So that's telemedicine, emergency resources, rehabilitation services, and recovery. Health equity, we know that a lot of the issues that we're talking about here today, as highlighted earlier, these things they're not spread always evenly across demographics, and we need to make sure we're incorporating that in our policy approach. Additionally, we're investing about $230 million over the next 10 years to help address barriers to health equity, including structural racism, social factors that hurt people's health, and threats to rural health. And active living. So this is helping to support and create opportunities for individuals and communities to get out and about and live their best lives. And I'll touch on more of that in a second, because that's sort of where a lot of the overlap between the American Heart Association and active transportation is. So advocacy. As our state government relations director, I'm a lobbyist. I work at the state legislature. I've seen a handful of you up there. That's a fun 7 weeks. I work with the local governments as well. I try to engage with MPOs, and this is me talking to you all here today, so you sort of know where potential relationships and partnerships exist with the American Heart Association and some of our partners. State agencies, Department of Health, others trying to change rules and do things like that. Local health departments, a lot of issues we're talking about get enforced or recorded by local health departments. There's a big burden on them, so I work with them as well. So active living, I'm just gonna read through this because this is really where the American Heart Association and our active living values overlap with active transportation. So we all want and deserve to live in a safe, healthy community. People who live in neighborhoods where it is easier and safer to walk around are more active and have reduced risk of heart disease and diabetes. And that is why the American Heart Association enthusiastically supports community-led efforts to pass policies to promote healthy livings. And that community-led effort, that's really the core of that for me. These relationships can't exist if we come in and tell people what to do or what they want. It really has to come from the community, and that's where our capacity exists to help support those. So from investing in bicycles and pedestrian safety projects to comprehensive complete streets policies, policy change creates more livable and safe neighborhoods for everyone to walk, ride, bike and roll and use transit. And something we'd worked on in the past, for example, is safe routes to school, making sure that the miles around each school, they're safe for children and parents to walk. There's pedestrian crossing, the sidewalks are even, it's just not a barrier and it's safe for them to do. So more on complete streets. I'm sure you're all very, very well versed on the elements and principles of complete streets, and you no doubt understand the approach to planning, designing, maintaining safe roads that enable access for people who need to use them, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorcyclists, motorists, and transit users of all ages and abilities. So at the American Heart Association, we draw a lot of our principles about what we'd like to see in a complete streets policy from Smart Growth America. And for us, it's important that these policies have ongoing evaluation and equity principles, and formal policy that work towards creating a safe and overall equitable multimodal transportation network through the strategy of requiring that every road construction and reconstruction project makes a street feel safe and comfortable for all users, preferably with a prioritization for communities that have been historically under-resourced, and those include both urban and rural communities. So there are excellent examples of these principles in place all over Utah and all over the Wasatch Front at different levels. Salt Lake County, Salt Lake City, Wasatch Front Regional Council, UDOT have all really embraced different parts of these and helped transform this in Utah over the past decade or so. So I really want to acknowledge that and say thank you for that. And also acknowledge that, you know, in Utah, we like to do things the Utah way. So a lot of times principles are present without using the exact same language. So I know that complete streets isn't the language that everybody's going to use, but a lot of those elements are still present. And a lot of communities have made great progress on this or have passed statements or official policies to embrace more of these policies, but have maybe room for updates or improvements, but don't necessarily have the capacity to take that on after doing it in the past 10 or 15 years or so. So that's where the American Heart Association comes in. As a partner, we have the capacity to do research, public outreach, serve as a convener, do all the types of different things. So if an entity is out there and thinks they're moving in a direction where they want to either strengthen their existing code or look into what this looks like in their communities, that's where the American Heart Association, that's basically our role. So that is a short introduction to why the American Heart Association is speaking with you today. I will be hanging around, and if there's any questions or anything like that, I'm happy to answer. But other than that, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next item up, item number 6.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Can I just briefly say that I just love that we have this partnership across different types of entities. You know,
absolutely.
We could say we're a transportation organization, you're a health organization. So what are we doing together?
Mm-hmm.
But we see these, and Brett's nodding, of course, on this. We see these connections, and that by working together, we're having common purposes, not on everything always, but I just appreciate the partnership and engagement that you're offering here, and then also in our work in policy making. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Andrew. And that's really what it's all about. We want to overlap on everything, but where we do overlap, you know, Utah, we're a bunch of communities, and when we're communicating with each other, we can kind of do the work more effectively. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much.
And even an e-bike has a better heart rate than the couch, right? That's right. All right, thank you. Item number 6 is a cooperative, or the Copperton Active Transportation Plan and Connectivity Ordinance. Tim Sullivan's going to tell us about that. Tim, go ahead.
It should be good, thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Kayla Malden. I'm a long range planner with the Greater Salt Lake Municipal Services District. I'm assigned to Copperton, so I'm the project lead from their side of things. Thank you for inviting us here today to speak with you about this project. It's one that we are extremely excited about. And before I start off, I just want to thank you all for funding the TLC program, for setting up this grant program. It's been really meaningful to our communities. The MSD has 3 long-range planners, soon to be 4 on staff, but none of us are transportation planners. And so this fund has really allowed us to bring in experts to help us with all sorts of things. We've done an on-street parking study for Kearns in the past, an active transportation plan for Kearns and Magna that Thomas was involved in, and now moving on to active transportation for Copperton and White City even. Good. So for anyone on the call who doesn't know, Copperton is located in Salt Lake County. It is as far west as you can go within the county. We have only about 800 residents. And it's a really interesting context because this community was originally established as a company town for Utah Copper Mine, now Rio Tinto. And so it has this really great fabric. You'll see some pictures of it as Tim goes through the slides. And as we were setting up this project, we understood that what we really needed for an active transportation plan was to preserve the assets that we already had within this community. So what do we do to promote walking and biking internal connections within Copperton when it has this historic fabric, this gridded street network that a lot of communities in Salt Lake County aren't as lucky to have? So that's one of the principal objectives of this active transportation plan. We really have 3 that we are seeking to address. This first one, again, looking at active transportation connections within the community. This is a place where walking and biking is already prevalent because there's not really a lot of traffic. People can get to destinations within a close amount of time. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of diversity of those destinations. So there's no elementary school, there's no grocery store, but they walk to their community meetings, they walk to the post office and to each other's house for recreation. And then the next thing we're seeking to address is street and pathway connectivity for future growth. So Copperton still holds a lot of land that's owned by Rio Tinto. Pretty much the entire northern half of the community is undeveloped. And so we're planning for future connections and opportunities in this area, as well as in Copperton's expansion areas. Copperton does have an annexation policy plan. And so they're looking to expand their borders in the future, although minimally. So we've been setting up ways that we can work on our connectivity in that area and set up for that future development. That's one of the aspects of this project that I'm extremely excited about. Tim's gonna speak to our connectivity ordinance, which was an accompaniment to this active transportation plan. And then finally, we're looking at regional active transportation connections. So Copperton's only about 3 miles from the red tracks line that runs through Daybreak. And currently there's not a single connection. So along Bingham Highway, there's no sidewalk, there's no bike lane, nothing to get residents from point A to point B. it doesn't stop them from trying. We've heard many tales through our general plan involvement process of people even using wheelchairs, taking wheelchairs down Bingham Highway to access tracks and get to their friends' homes in the valley. And so we really want to seek to address this. We know that people, use that infrastructure, it's available, it's nearby. So how do we make those connections to a community that historically has been so isolated from the rest of the valley? And looking at recreation as well, we're lucky that there are several trail alignments that are now planned that come very close to Copperton. So the last thing that I'm going to mention for this active transportation plan and connectivity ordinance before I turn it over to Tim is that one of the key objectives of this plan, beyond those 3 tenets that I mentioned, our vision for this plan is not just related to the end product, but also to the process. And so we are really trying to be innovative with the ways that we engage with this community. Like I said, we only have about 800 residents, and previously they haven't been super active in planning and decision making. We had a great general plan that was actually done by Michaela Jordan with WFRC when she was with the MSD, but it was done during COVID. So a lot of our engagement was online. We didn't have the participation that we may have otherwise gotten. So we're trying to be creative again in how we approach this. We conducted a walking tour with some of our committee members. We're inviting as many people as we can get on that committee, kind of using snowball method, getting neighbors to refer others to join us. And we're super excited. Coming up in July, we'll be hosting a barbecue with this community to get them to come out to their park and give us their feedback, their information, all of their experiences with active transportation in Copperton in a place where they're already gathering, which is their local park. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tim to talk about more of the details.
Everybody, it's really great to be able to speak in front of this group about this project. We're really excited about it. So I'm with Township and Range Community Planning. We're a small, mostly transportation planning firm. We do some urban design and land use planning as well in downtown Salt Lake. And we've teamed with Alta Planning and Design for this. And so that's our consultant team for this effort. Forgot to bring that up. And just a real quick overview of the process here. It's really kind of 3 phases. We're right kind of in the middle of the first phase, which is information gathering, analysis, establishing our community stakeholder committee, going into the first phase of public outreach, developing project goals, establishing or identifying opportunities. There'll be a next phase of generating ideas and developing those ideas into concepts. Creating a draft active transportation network. And then finally, we'll create a draft plan and review that plan with the community and our committee. So the committee that we have is really important. It's really focused on Copperton residents and community leadership. So we've got a core group of Copperton folks that we've had 2 meetings with so far. They've both been really great, really productive. Including the mayor and I believe the planning commission members and a council member, as well as some other residents. So we've got a great group so far. We had a kickoff in April where we had a walking tour of the community and then had a meeting just recently to follow up on that. And out of that first kickoff meeting, we developed 6 draft project goals. The first one, and these do roughly correspond with the objectives kind of from that Kayla identified, that we identified from the outset of the project, but we're honing in on more specific things here. Build safe walking and biking and other active transportation infrastructure to better connect the existing Copperton community, ensure calm, people-oriented environments. The second one is sense of place and history. So respect and enhance the sense of place and community history within Copperton's public spaces. So Copperton has this really interesting history, both it and the area around it, and Bingham Canyon and around the mine. And so there's a really distinct look of the town. Feels like a historic place, just kind of out right up against the foothills. So we want to be able to respect that, but also figure out ways to enhance that for people-oriented spaces throughout the community. To reduce the barrier that Bingham Highway poses to active transportation. So and enhance its role as Copperton's main street. So it's the main road kind of coming into Copperton, going through the community. So how can we, make it easier to cross, give it more of that Main Street feel? It's a state route, so it's important to work with UDOT on this. The surrounding open space has really interesting opportunities. So we've set a goal around that. So create connections, mining and development buffers and recreational spaces in the open land around Copperton. So a lot of this land is, it's owned by Rio Tinto. So that's a really important relationship there. But there are a lot of opportunities for trails and other connections in that open space. Copperton's almost entirely surrounded by this open space that's, essentially the mining land. And then destination connections. So link Copperton to nearby regional destinations by walking, biking, rolling, and other methods of active transportation. So Kayla covered that in her slides. Finally, what we're calling community capital, build strong relationships, collaboration, and community empowerment in Copperton through active transportation. So along the lines of what Kayla mentioned, we're really looking at this as an opportunity to kind of build the community's capacity for making these changes and becoming more, engaged with other stakeholders and, improving the community. So ultimately, the project will create a vision for improving active transportation in Copperton, that network of planned improvements for all types of active transportation, and then a prioritized list of projects. So, pretty typical active transportation plan. One piece that we are essentially done with that we did up front because of the development of the revision of the subdivision ordinance that the MSD was working on, the county was working on, was the connectivity ordinance. So in December and January, we worked with a team to develop this first piece of the project. And this included an overall kind of big picture vision for street and trail connections in Copperton, and also thinking about those annexation areas, standards for those areas, and then also implications for community design that connectivity creates. So it's not just street connections, but it's also about how lots front onto streets and about how open spaces and trails all work together with the street network. And so the connectivity ordinance really is and will be largely applied to property, currently owned by Rio Tinto. And so we've been working with them and in working through the connectivity ordinance. We've presented to them. We've made a few refinements, that they've requested. So we're working in conjunction with Rio Tinto on that ordinance. And so this is the piece of the puzzle that's really focused on Copperton. So as we mentioned, there are some annexation areas that could be the place for future expansion, but within the existing part of Copperton, it's quite constrained. And there is a desire in the community to extend the current network. So we have this great historic connected street network around Copperton Park, with this great park in the middle, really defines the community character. So one of the thoughts is how do we extend the network out and kind of keep that going? But with, there are some land use constraints. There's homes and other properties that, prevent streets from naturally getting kind of extended out. And there's a lot of topography as well. So we created this kind of more specific vision of how these streets could all work together along with the envisioned open space in the north end of Copperton that the general plan has envisioned. And so we developed this as a way to show, the way that the existing part of Copperton could be connected in a way that works with, existing property use and the topography and then the general plan vision. At the same time, for the future annexation areas, we developed more typical connectivity ordinance standards that look at a street connectivity index. So, the ratio of links to nodes, so street segments to intersections, more or less. Block length, so make sure the blocks aren't too long. What happens at the community edge? How do you make sure that there's street stubs and other connections as subdivisions are built out and can connect to one another? And then trail networks. So trail networks are a big part of this as well, is how do we ensure that future development has those trail networks working through it, especially with all the opportunities for trails in Copperton. So then looking at the other pieces of the project for the active transportation plan, we've started to look at the existing pedestrian network, which is, pretty good, existing sidewalks, and new projects as well, some new sidewalk construction, kind of paired with, what are the existing pathways and trails, not really trails, dirt roads through the mining land. What are the opportunities to start making those connections? And so we've started to look at that existing pedestrian network. There's really not much in the way of, very little in the way of bicycling infrastructure there. We start to look at safety, crash data, speed limits, and those elements of safety as well. And then we've also started to look at that regional network. So looking at the Bonneville Shoreline Trail potential alignments for how those would come into play, how they might connect to Copperton. Look at the potential alignment for a Bingham Creek Trail that could get connected Daybreak. So this just gives you a sense of some of the things we're starting to look at. We're really at the front end of this project. And as Kayla mentioned, the next steps really are the community barbecue that is scheduled on July 17th. So that's really our first open house, our first opportunity to really connect in person with the community. Hopefully, this pattern of thunderstorms every day abates by then. And so we're hoping for some nice weather in Copperton Park at the pavilion to introduce people to the project, kind of show them our draft goals, and then get initial feedback. We also have an online component. I think this community really likes to interact in person, but we do have an online component. We'll have an interactive map for people to add thoughts to. And then we'll take all that information and move on to the next phase of the project. So any questions?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So as you're talking about New Bingham Highway and Old Bingham Highway, you talk about West Jordan. So I would love to work with you on getting that. I ride that road up to Copperton because Copperton is a great community. But as you know, there's very little shoulder there. In fact, there used to be no shoulder. We striped it a little bit and we added a little bit of a shoulder because there was nothing there. But it's not sufficient. So I'd like to work with you in making that connection so they can get from Copperton to that track station. So,
yeah, I think we're still in the phase of kind of building up our kind of local connections and stuff, but there's a lot of stakeholders, including West Jordan, South Jordan, UDOT, that we need to kind of reach out to and connect with. So we'll definitely be reaching out to West Jordan.
Yeah, Old Bingham Highway is shared by West Jordan and South Jordan. The New Bingham Highway is all in West Jordan. And I met with Mayor Clayton just a couple of weeks ago and had conversations about this and to work with him on that.
Great.
So we'd be happy to be involved in that.
Great, thank you.
I think there's one hand raised online. Byron, did you have a question?
Just a comment related to Mayor Burton's comment. We're just now kicking off the 5600 West track station stationary plan, and we are aware of the desire for Copperton to improve that connectivity. So as that project goes along, we'll definitely keep Copperton in this project in mind.
Great.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. All right, the next item is a presentation by Hugh to give us an update on active transportation funding and an overview. Go ahead, Hugh.
Thanks, Mayor. And we've had a number of requests just trying for folks to help understand the AT funding landscape. I'll be brief here because there are a lot of different opportunities, and mostly want to make folks aware that you can reach out to us about any of these and see what fits for your community or ask us questions in addition to some of the other partners here. But if you go to the next slide, Jordan. So just overview, sorry, it's very text heavy. And like I said, won't jump into all of these, but these will all be available with our hyperlinks in the follow-up email presentation. So you can see at the state level, that very first link will take you to a UDOT funding matrix that we'll look at the next slide, but won't jump into it now. Obviously, the big new change was the $45 million yearly investment in the ATIF that's going on. But the next two down are local or locality specific funds that anybody, the local municipality, can apply for. And the nominations for those two funds, the TIF active funds and the TTIF first last mile funds, are opening on June 26th and will be open through the end of August for nominations. So again, the links there will take you to UDOT's website on that with some more information, what qualifies, what doesn't, but really great funds there as well. There's the Region Transportation Alternatives Program. That's region by region. So Region 1, Region 2, Region 3 for those folks that might be listening to this call. And those go out to region specific. Safe Sidewalk Fund is for sidewalks that are missing along state roadways. And then Recreational Trails Program and Outdoor Rec Grants, obviously geared more towards recreation, but there's a lot of overlap in our trail systems, but also administered by the state with their own deadlines. Can you go to the next slide, Jordan? So this is that matrix. The UDOT funding matrix gives a little bit of information on the funds that they're programming and the requirements based on state code, where those come in. If you have questions about this, obviously reach out to us, but we can also put you in touch with the folks at UDOT if you don't have a direct connection there, if there's something that we can't answer for you along the way. Next slide, please. So on the federal side of things, these are funds that are typically administered by the MPO. If you fall outside of an MPO area, right, you'll be in more of the UDOT funding programs. Again, we can help you work through that. But the STP, CRP, CMAQ are not necessarily active transportation specific, but there are a lot of active transportation eligible projects that can fall into those programs, especially if they're tied to another project that's going on. The Transportation Alternatives Program is more geared to active transportation. And then there's various federal discretionary grants, such as the RAISE grant. And we'll jump to a matrix there on the next slide in just a second. And there's a lot of things that are eligible, again, usually tied with another project. And so something you have to look into detail, and we can help you through some of that if there's anything that jumps out of interest to you. Before we go to the next slide, just on the local side, remember you have your third and fourth quarter cent sales tax funds that are available, both the city and the county. And those are, oh, thanks, Jory, for putting it on the chat. Those are great ways to build up funds that can act as match for any of these other grants. A lot of these do have matching requirements. And if you can do some set asides with money that you're collecting for transportation generally, they can go to as an act as match these other ones. Jordan, can you go to the next slide? This is that federal matrix. Again, it's like, whoa, okay, this is way too text heavy and hard to look at. So I won't go into any detail. There's a link to this that you can look at yourselves. Or again, if you have a question about something, we're happy to try and answer it or track down the right people to answer it for you. So a lot of things are eligible under these federal programs. Next slide, if there is one. Oh yeah. So I want to piggyback on what Noah was saying earlier about the technical assistance they provide on the policy level. And there's planning funding sources also available from the MPOs, the state, and the National Park Service, Bike Utah. Now I can say the American Heart Association when it comes to policies. So if you're not familiar with any of these programs, reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with the right people. There is a lot of funding out there for this technical assistance and doing plans, just like we heard from Kayla and Tim, that's going on in Copperton through the TLC program. So reach out if you have any questions or if you have an idea to see where it might fit, and we would love to work with you on any of that stuff. Thank you.
All right, any questions for Hugh? All right, seeing none, thank you. Now, next item is our other business. The 2023 through 2050 Regional Transportation Plan was adopted. The Unified Plan's forthcoming. Hugh, you want to talk about that and the TIF and the first and last mile?
Yep, I'll do that. And actually, Jory, if you're online, do you want to just say something about the adoption of the RTP or even TED?
Yeah, for sure. Long overdue, and a great appreciation for our local communities, transportation partners, key stakeholders for providing 4 years of input on the regional transportation plan. It is adopted. You can find an interactive map. I'll drop that here in the chat and be able to review all the projects within that. We have a document that supports the planning process with lots of other information, including performance measures and impacts and benefits. So review that. There's also costing and other things. So there's about 20 plus appendices to the document itself. So do appreciate everybody's assistance in this. One thing that I'll maybe work with this committee on and Hugh is we want to do a debrief on the last plan. You know, what worked, what didn't work, what didn't we get to do. I think it would be good for the Active Transportation Committee to, you know, weigh in on that, and we'll take those comments as we work internally with, you know, your planners and engineers at the technical advisory committees and our partners to develop the game plan for 2027's update. So kind of expect something coming up here in the next few months, but do appreciate everybody and everybody's help on this.
Due to a certain canyon transportation mode, it was the most public commented RTP I've ever seen in my time around WFRC. So I'm not naming the mode. I don't want to start any more fires. But yeah.
Mayor, one other thing in Hugh, look for the Wasatch Choice vision update in August and September. So we're working on that, and as you know, the Wasatch Choice vision ties economic development, land use, and transportation. So the RTP really focused on the transportation piece. The vision will be coming out this August, and then also statewide, the Unified Transportation Plan, coordinated with all the other MPOs, UDOT, UTA, looks to have a launch in September. So everything's tying together nicely here and should be rolled out in the next few months.
We want to recognize Stephanie Tomlin was appointed as the Trails Division Leader at UDOT. So if you have trails issues, that's who we contact now. All right, the next meeting, unless there's anything else, the next meeting is August the 9th, 2023. Upcoming events, there's a Transcom meeting June 15th and a WFRC RGC TAC meeting on July 12th. And we have a bunch of meetings, Transcom TAC meeting August 3rd, Sandy Mobile Active Transportation Tour August 11th, WFRC RGC meeting August 17th, WFRC meeting August 24th, and the 2023, this is cool, Utah Outdoor Recreation Summit, September 6th through 7th. Put that on your calendar. Anything else from anyone? We're actually going to end a little early. All right, then is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mayor. Second. Thank you, Mayor. All in favor of adjournment, say aye. I'm sure there are none opposed. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.